You're able to get through some of them. So, okay. Okay. Kind of had a very busy day. Didn't want to start taking classes today. I went to work at 9 and came back at 5:10 in the evening. It was very tempting not to take a class, but I told myself, no, I am going to take a class. So actually, you've seen my tantrum where I have said we don't need education. And then people intervened and said, why are you so angry? Till then, I hadn't realized that I was angry because I normally don't get angry. Even while I deleted the group, everything, it was, I did it very coolly. It's just that I was completely disgruntled and disgusted with people not turning up for 2 days after I put the links. So anyway, that's not important. Uh, Now the thing is, I believe you have yeah, I believe you people have examinations from the 9th of December. So it makes absolutely no sense for me to try and teach the entire, what should I say? It is meaningless to try and teach the whole paper, which is Western political theory, thought, whatever it's called. So I don't think we can do that. So I had told Jeremy that you people, please, we'll make this an interactive kind of a thing. Uh, you ask me something that you didn't understand or you found difficult to understand, or you found something uh, which you thought is eluding your comprehension. So that was what I had in mind. I didn't want to start teaching because what happens with me is that I'm a bit of a, yeah, yeah, Sharmi. So the problem with me is that if I start, uh, what should I say? If I start teaching, then the main problem that we'll all have is that I have a tendency to go into the details, very small details. People say it's God lies in the details. Some people say devil lies. I mean, lies in the details. So you choose if it's God or devil. But if I do start going uh, into the nitty-gritties of the whole thing, then the problem that we face is that I will waste your time, maybe. So if you have, I don't know from where I got this idea that her name is Sharni. I really don't know. I somehow thought she told me her name was Sharni because I'm too stupid actually to figure out pronunciations all on my own. Uh, so how did I get there? So she says she's Charani. So Charani has also told me now as to what she wants to get clarified. And while I'm clarifying Charani's doubt, which is actually quite a significant and big kind of doubt, if any of you have doubts in what I taught and what has been taught to you after I couldn't continue teaching. So you can ask me questions from anywhere. And you can also, doesn't have to be Western political theory or philosophy. You have other papers, since this is it's all political science. It shouldn't be too difficult for me to answer questions that you might have about other things. So let's go to Charani. What is not clear to you about the telos?
Good evening, sir. So, frankly speaking, they did not taught us this topic very clearly. Actually, they skipped the topic. So, I would like to get clear of it, sir.
Okay. See, there is one thing that you must know about all the ancient cultures. Today, we talk about research. We are constantly talking about research. And if you break the term research, meaning search again. Okay. So that means that there is already some construct about a concept or about a particular idea or about a particular system. So there's already something there, and there is possibly disagreement somewhere. So to basically get rid of that uncertainty and trying to establish uh, one view as perhaps being the better view than others is what research as basically does. But if you look at the very early civilizations, they didn't have research because there was no knowledge before that. So if you look at the Greeks, we started with the Milesians, and a lot of the knowledge produced by ancient civilizations. I'll talk here only about the Greek civilization. You will find that quite a few things in that are actually enmeshed with some kind of mythology. Okay, so even though the Malaysians set out with the purpose of demystifying the world, as they called it, they really didn't succeed despite their, especially Anaximander's wonderful experiments, which have inspired modern scientists like Newton. And so you see that modern knowledge has actually grown from the Greek knowledge. Now, if you were either Galileo or if you were Newton, then you would research on Anaximander. What would you research about Anaximander? Anaximander's idea that everything in this world, unless it is resting on something, has a tendency to fall. That's what he said. And he wanted to understand what is it that makes things fall to the ground. Okay, so he was working out some experiments, but it so happened that he probably didn't have enough time. By that I mean he didn't have any more time to live and find something meaningful as an answer. But his idea that the earth is a cylinder rotating on its own axis is an amazing idea. It's absolutely an amazing idea. So he's probably the first one who has given some kind of a definition of what uh, space is, because he said it's in space that the earth is rotating, it's a cylinder rotating on its own axis. So now, when the Renaissance happened, and after that, the Reformation happened, but mainly after the Renaissance, you see that uh, the last phase of the Greek civilization, which is uh, the last phase, was called the Hellenistic phase. And the Hellenistic phase, you'll find people are very pessimistic. Yet they documented a number of things, despite their pessimism and in certain cases, cynicism. They basically they did have a compilation of the earlier Greek knowledge, starting from the Milesians, going through Eleatic school and the wonderful Athenian civilization. So what we find is that a lot of people who, for fear of persecution by the church, decided that they will not bring this knowledge out into the open, and they will not start any kind of debates on this, because they believe that not only could they possibly lose their lives, also if somebody decides, some barbaric thought enters somebody's mind, and that person decides that let's get rid of all these stupid books. then we would be left with nothing. It's only when the Renaissance happened that we find uh, the minds of people opening, not completely. Uh, the complete opening of the mind happened after the Reformation, because the church continued to be an institution of authority. And you must understand, in those days, there is no differentiation between the private realm and the public realm. None of this differentiation. If today I ask you, uh, what were you doing last night? What did you eat? Did you go out and watch a film or something? One answer that you can legitimately give to that kind of a question is, how is it your business as to what I did last year? So you see, this is because of, last night. This is because of the fact that the way in which people looked at society changed with the Renaissance and the Revolution. Till then, you had what was called social solidarity, which means people relied upon each other for the sake of, they relied on each other for the sake of their own security, for learning new things. So, therefore, these people didn't want to get caught in the uh, problems that were first raised by the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was a pretty horrible empire for all its greatness otherwise. And probably it became bearable only after it turned into the Holy Roman Empire at the time of Emperor Constantine. And you will see that uh, the Roman Empire had become so big that it needed two capitals, one in Rome for the Western Roman Empire and one in what we call Turkey today, and what we call Istanbul, which is Constantinople. It's named after Constantine, who made Christianity the official religion of ancient Rome. But otherwise, the Romans were barbarians in their own way. Their punishments were terrible. I think they almost equaled the Spanish Inquisition in terms of how they punished people. So, what happened is that in the modern period, as we see it today, there is a paradigm shift. The paradigm shift is today, if I ask you, what is society? You'll say society is an aggregation of individuals. Okay, you'll say it's an aggregation of individuals. So society takes on the dimensions of an association. Okay, you form an association for whatever necessities. You could form a student association and demand that I be banned from teaching you, or you could form what should I say, a formal association and demand that you be taught properly. So an association is when people with a common purpose come together to make demands upon whoever is ruling, and doesn't matter what is the nature of that ruling. It can be an empire, it can be the church, it can be anything. Okay, so if you therefore look at the modern construct, in the modern construct, it is the individual who comes first. So if you talk to somebody like John Locke, the really first individualist in the modern period, John Locke basically uh, talks about how something being good for society uh, cannot be good for everyone. Okay, he says if something is good for society, it's not something that is good for everyone. So what he was denying is the idea of collective good. He's denying the idea of collective good and saying that you cannot talk about something that is good for everyone. So what is good for me is something that may not be good for you. So when you kind of pursue this, what you find is that you're saying that the individual comes first, and it is the individual who is rational and therefore has the ability to decide for himself as to what is good for him and what is not good for him. This is the individualist bias that you find in the political economy of John Locke. Though there is no political economy in Adam Smith, Smith is also somebody who is a borderline political economist because the political component that we find in Locke in such a big way is hardly there in Adam Smith. So he gets categorized as not a political economist, but simply as an economist and as somebody who uh, believed in the idea of a free market liberating people. He saw the liberation of individuals happening within the restrictions of the free market. Okay, so this is where you're saying that the individual comes before society comes. Now, let's exaggerate it a bit. It means that if there is no individual, then there is no society. That is the answer that you will find for the question, which comes first, the individual or society? And when we first studied these things, it did look like a rational construct, a completely rational construct where you are basically saying that how can you have a society or an association without people? So you first need to have individuals, and then they'll come together and form some kind of an association. Okay. Now Aristotle is somebody who almost speaks this language. He almost doesn't speak this language entirely, he almost speaks this language of individuals in the context of society. And he has, if you look at some of his early writings, he doesn't seem to be somebody who gives greater importance to society than uh, he does to an individual, okay? Because he's talking about enlightened individuals, remember. So, but what you need to understand is that he's not talking about these enlightened individuals without a context. And what is the context? The context is life in the polis, P-O-L-I-S. Life in the polis is the context in which Aristotle is saying what he wants to say. So then, if we look at this, you find this particular construct in Aristotle, which says what is good for the society is good for the individual. So here is a case of privileging the idea of the collective, the group of people over the individual, though it looks like when he talks about people forming associations, it looks like he's being an individualist. He's not. How can we say he's not? For that, you have to understand the idea of the telos. Mind you, these are ancient Greeks, and they have moved away from what was being studied by the Milesians, perhaps to a certain extent even the Eleatics. They had moved away from that. They are not concentrating on matter. They're not concentrating on primary substance. They are trying to understand how does an individual live, or how does an individual come to live the way he lives in the polis. So Aristotle basically says, I told you before that Aristotle was not the first to use causal explanations, but he was one of the first to try and give a proper definition of causal explanation. So what is a causal explanation? We talk about a cause-effect sequence, okay? You talk about a cause-effect sequence. So let's say, what is the effect now? The effect is that I didn't engage classes for a while, and therefore you now feel that something that should have been taught properly has not been taught. That's just an example, don't take it too seriously. I don't know how to teach. And if you look more at that, then you'll say, why didn't he teach in the middle? So why didn't he teach is the effect, okay? No longer the cause. Here the effect is we were not taught properly. We don't know these things properly because he didn't teach. Now you are saying, why didn't he teach? So then you'll try to find an answer for that. He looks like a hippopotamus, but actually doesn't keep such a great health. And he spends more time in hospitals rather than in colleges and in his own house. So now that is the cause of the effect, which is why didn't this person take classes? So the cause is he keeps bad health. So you say, why does he keep bad health? Oh, he's really a bad person. He's greedy. He eats too much. Okay, drinks too much. Smokes too much. Add anything you want. I don't do any of these, by the way. So if you are looking at that particular kind of thing, then what are we looking at? What we are looking at is this particular uh, idea that a causal explanation suffers from a very, very serious problem. And the serious problem is that how do you stop the cause effect chain just regressing? It's regressing. Okay. You're saying this is the effect. No, this is the cause. This is the cause, then this is the effect. And if this is the effect, then this is the cause. Now you keep going back. Where do you stop? Where do you stop? I was having some philosophical chats with my mother, and she asked me, when the world began, uh, if there was no such thing as bad in the first yuga, which is the Krita Yuga, uh, in that particular yuga, if there was no adharma, then how come people who were not even adharmic had a bad karma uh, which made them to be born again as some other lowly life form? So I told my mother, don't look at it this way, because you're trying to understand where the universe came from. What was there in the universe before all this was there? So even Big Bang Theory, I'm not talking about Sheldon, whoever they are, I've forgotten their names. I'm not talking about that Big Bang Theory. I'm talking about the physics Big Bang Theory, which says that this world came into being because the sun was basically a hydrogen ball, uh, exploded when he came in some contact with another gas like oxygen. So what we find is that pieces from the sun were all strewn around the celestial space. And we say that so that Big Bang led to the creation of this universe. Now, and we also say that when the Big Bang took place, what we today call planets were not uh, fit for people to live. Okay, the planets were also great raging balls of fire. because the sun is nothing but fire. Okay, you can't go to the sun and say, well, I landed on the moon, now it's time I'll land on the sun. Elon Musk might tell you that. Elon Musk really knows how to sell crappy dreams. So SpaceX may tell you that you can go to the sun, take some rest on the sun and come back. That's not possible. Okay, that's not possible because this is somebody who is uh, what we say, uh, you know, a gas ball without solidity. The sun is a gas ball. There's nothing solid in the sun. So when the Big Bang took place, then how did the planets become solid bodies? So we say the planets started cooling when they moved a certain distance away from uh, the sun. And if they were moving away from the sun, the heat of the sun was not as bad as what it was otherwise. And so they had a few billion years to cool down, form a crust, a solid crust on the surface. And if it is the Earth, it also had oxygen and other gases that are necessary for life to flourish. So you don't find life flourishing in any other planet in our galaxy, which is the Milky Way. So you don't find anything there. There's no life. Now the question that you need to ask yourself, very, very simple question, is did the whole universe, okay, did the whole universe actually come into being from the explosion of our one sun? And if that is the case, why is it that we are quite close to the sun compared to some others which are far, far away? They're very far away. So how did they go that far and how did we stay here? And if you look at stars, they have this nice feel about them. They look like they're cool. And people say that nothing like sleeping uh, outside in an open space, preferably grass, under the cool sky, which has stars in it. So we say we associate hey, shut up. So we associate coolness with stars. We see stars are like the sun, helium, hydrogen, all those. They are like that, and they are sometimes about 10 times bigger than our sun. Our sun doesn't throw light to the extent that these ultra big suns throw their light. So you see, when you are pulled into an illusion here, where you're looking at the sky and saying, I can see that star. And when you say that, what exactly do you mean? You mean that there is a star there and I can see it. In reality, we have to measure distances, astral distances, in light years. And if we measure things in light years, it has taken thousands of light years for light to come from those distant celestial bodies down to Earth. It came down to Earth from those distant bodies. Now we are seeing it now because the light has hit our eyes. So what if that star had died already? Stars die, I'm sure you know that. So not film stars. Stars actually die. They implode sometimes and die. So the question, therefore, is the Big Bang Theory right? Does it really explain what we want to know? It is not. It is not. And even if you look at the idea of gravity, which came from Newton after he studied Galileo and Anaximander, when he started talking about the earth pulling objects down and not objects having a tendency to fall on the earth, he was backed up by the cannonball experiments of Galileo and other experiments carried out by Anaximander. So he was looking at these things. And if you look at the whole truth of physics, be it quantum physics or be it what we call string theory of physics, they don't agree with each other. And nobody makes the claim that the entire universe happened with the Big Bang. Okay, so my mother was saying, how did people commit sins? It was all about dharma. I said, that's a story. It's not a cock and bull story. It's a story that tells you how to understand the cyclical aspect of dharma. It's not like, oh, there was nothing and suddenly the Krita Yoga came. No, nothing like that. Maybe we should go into the beliefs of the Jains. The Jains believe that the universe didn't have a beginning. By that, what they're saying is that it was always there. And so, if it didn't have a beginning, it doesn't have an end. It doesn't have an end. So the Jains don't have this whole concept of nirvana and all that and cycles of life and death. They don't have those things. So you see what I'm trying to point out here is that there is this tendency for us to look for the beginning. What is the pure cause, the cause that led to all other causes and effects that we have known in the past, we continue to know now, and probably we may know in the future. Okay, if that is what we are saying, then you are agreeing with Aristotle. Because Aristotle, when he says that it is associations that are formed by human beings that provide you with what you should live like. How should your life be? So for him, it is the telos. The telos is the end goal. That doesn't mean that there'll be nothing after that. What he means is, okay, we are living here, we formed all these associations. But what is the goal? Why are we here? Which is what the Americans are still asking themselves. Are we alone? I tell them, yes, you are. We are not. And so if you look at that kind of a thing, you get a very clear picture that Aristotle is telling you that life is purposive. It has a purpose. It's not random. It's not random, not something that happened like a big bang and planets went around and all that kind of stuff. What he's trying to tell you is the purpose of life is to live it ethically. Ethically or morally, here we can use them synonymously. Later on we can't, but here you can. Ethically. Okay, so the telos is that which is the ethical end. End means not over. The goal of human life and human society. So though he says man has a tendency to form associations, the first natural association is the family. The second natural association is the village, and the third natural association is the polis. He's calling them associations, but not associations as we know them today. He's calling these associations as those which bring human beings together to understand the idea of collective good. The idea of collective good, and also the idea that what is good for society is good for the individual. So that is one part of the telos. Part two, I shall tell you tomorrow. I won't take more than 5 minutes. This was the slightly big part. Part two is much easier to understand once you understand this. Is that all right, Charlie? Is there anybody out there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'll see you tomorrow, 5:30. Is it okay? Okay. 5:30 tomorrow. And I'll probably be a little more organized than I have been today, but I came very late and my back is short. I have 2 more classes today. Thank you for coming. See you tomorrow at 5:30.